The episode starts with the Queen of Numenor holding a random baby. Take this. The kingdom gets flooded and destroyed out of nowhere, and then she wakes up because it's just a dream. God forbid anything actually happen on this show. Cut to Guild Guy, complaining about elves to the town, and gaining some traction. He wants to make Numenor great again. Cut to the Chancellor and his son. Apparently, this show doesn't have enough side characters. Cut to Guild Guy saying, "They took our jobs." And now people are really listening. The Chancellor breaks up the angry white mob, saying, "There's only one elf here. Everybody fucking chill." Then he buys the whole crowd a round of drinks. Cut to two people that no one cares about. Cut to Galadriel talking with the Queen. She tells her that White Male is actually King White Guy, and that they need to come together to fight Sauron. The Queen says no. Galadriel is pissed and demands to speak to the manager, her father, the king. It's here that we get another powerful scene of expertly crafted dialogue.
Or are you a castaway, grasping for a handhold in a tempest? There is a tempest in me. It swept me to this island for a reason, and it will not be quelled by you, Regent.
Then they put her in jail with King White Guy. Cut to young seaman, daydreaming, while everyone else is working. He lets go of the rope that he's holding, and gets himself and his friends kicked out of boat club. His friend is pissed. They fight and part ways. Cut to Elf Guy number 2, still in Elfschwitz. We meet Adar, the evil elf. He kills a wounded orc, putting it out of its misery. He briefly talks to Elf Guy number 2, then decides to let him go, to deliver a message. Cut to White Lady, who is now the leader of her people, but they only brought 4 potatoes for the whole trip. Whoopsie. They argue about what to eat, and the son walks off to go back into town to get some food, against her wishes. They gather some food, and then White Lady's kid decides to go into an abandoned house, alone. Things get spooky, and the friend bails. He's out of there. He runs into an orc, hits him with the Sauron sword, and hides in a well. Cut to the construction of the forge that was mentioned all the way back in the first episode. Elf Guy number 1 is talking with Calibrim Boomer. He thinks that the dwarves are hiding something. Cut to Elf Guy number 1 in the dwarf's apartment. The wife lies to him to cover for her husband. Cut to the dwarf and his wife discussing private matters out in the open. And we find out that Elf Guy number 1 has super hearing, and he now knows that the dwarves are lying to him. Elf Guy number 1 confronts the dwarf, who makes him pinky promise, then shows him the new ore that they've found.
Mithril.
The dwarf gives him a piece, and then a cave-in occurs. Cut back to 2 people that no one cares about. Cut to Galadriel, pacing in prison, almost as if there's a tempest in her. King White Guy makes her realize that she acted like a Karen. The Chancellor shows up and says they're sending Galadriel to the elves. Next, 4 Numenorian guards lock themselves in a prison cell, in an action scene inspired by Steven Seagal. Cut to young seaman, overhearing that Galadriel escaped. Cut to Galadriel, breaking and entering into the king's chambers. She's met by the queen, who tells her the king has dementia. She takes out a seeing stone and Galadriel touches it. She sees the big wave from the beginning of the episode. Galadriel asks her to join the elves in the fight against evil, and she says no, again. Cut to White Lady and her people. The son's friend comes back with some food, and White Lady realizes her kid is missing. Cut to the kid hiding in a well, contaminating all the water. He climbs out and gets tackled by an orc. Elf Guy number 2 shows up out of nowhere and saves him. Cut to them running through a forest, being chased by an entire army of orcs. Elf Guy number 2 catches an arrow and fires it back. White Lady shows up, and not a single orc catches up with them. They all stop at the edge of the forest because orcs are vampires and can't be in the sunlight. Cut to the dwarf's wife, singing to a mountain. She apologizes to Elf Guy number 1. Because of the cave-in, Daddy Dwarf shuts down the operation, and he's not happy about it. They talk about their daddy issues, and Dwarf apologizes to Daddy Dwarf. They decide that the dwarf will accompany Elf Guy number 1 to wherever the fuck he's going. Cut to White Lady and Elf Guy number 2. He delivers Adar's message, which is surrender or die. Cut to White Lady's kid. An old man offers him some alcohol and says that the Sauron sword belonged to him. He says Sauron's coming back and just gets up and leaves. Cut to Elfschwitz. An orc tells Adar, "We found it. It's in the tower." Cut to Galadriel, being escorted out of Numenor. They put her on a boat and she stares at the queen, and they paddle her away. Next, the city cries tears of flowers because she left. The queen makes a speech to her people and then brings out Galadriel as a surprise guest, and says she will personally take her back to Middle-earth and help fight the orcs in the Southlands. Cut to young Seaman and his friends, volunteering to go to Middle-earth. Then, every single person in Numenor also volunteers. End of episode.